and we're back for another live stream. So we'll just jump right into it, I guess. Let me see if there's anything I want to say beforehand, actually. I did publish the detox. I'd been talking about deep detox, so there is a link on my Substack now on the blog. If you haven't seen that, I will post it here in the chat. I don't think I can. That's the link on this. If you can post that for them, it's asking me to log in. I don't. I'm already logged in, so. Oh. Is my mic off? It says that it's on. Let me see. All right, he says it's on. Anyway, if you could post that link to the chat. It's like asking me to log in a bunch of times. Let me see if I can log in. Okay. I think I was able to post it. Anyway, there's I don't see it showing up. Anyway, if you go to blog.mygotodoc.com, it's the second to last article posted on June 6th called "The Deepest Detox is the Last Mile." Should be publishing another one this weekend, which is on brain detox and the brain detox protocol, which a lot of you may have already seen. It's on my Twitter timeline, but this is a lot more in-depth and a lot more detail about the reasoning behind it, why you need to do it, why probably everyone needs to do it, really. First of all, talking about the importance of brain health to overall body health. I mean, the brain is kind of like the emperor of the body, and when the emperor is crazy, nothing else works very well in the land or in the empire. Nothing goes as it should. So the brain affects every other tissue and organ, and really, you could think of all of those other tissues and organs as being there just to support the brain and keep it alive. So either directly or indirectly, the brain closely commands actually every other organ and tissue. So it could either be relatively direct through the peripheral nervous system or the autonomic nervous system, or it could be somewhat indirect through the release of hormones. Okay, so that's, and then look out for the next one, which is, so anyway, that's going to be this weekend. I'm releasing like the article on the importance of the brain and importance of sleep, also why that's important for brain detox, and then why probably in the modern world we need an extra kind of boost with this brain detox cream that you apply to the neck when you go to sleep to help open up the swollen, inflamed passageways down from the neck, down from the head and nose and eyes and the ears that drain through the neck, and then toxins from there can be released through your stool, urine, etc. But the one that I published on June 6th, called "The Deepest Detox is the Last Mile," has a really profound, deep detox methodology that kind of offers a whole body detox. So I do still think people need specific brain detox, but then you also need whole body detox. And this depends on the detox pathways being open. So again, that's, your sweat, through your skin, you can detox, through your lungs, through your kidneys, into your urine, through your liver, and bowel movements, so a lot of detox happens to the toilet, which is one of the reasons actually I think it's important, more important than I used to think in the modern world, especially to drink plenty of fluids. You're basically exercising your kidneys, helping them to flush out toxins. So maybe in the pre-modern era when we weren't exposed to so many toxins in the air and water and food and, everywhere from every direction, maybe people could get by, drinking less or, not making such a big point of, drinking. But it's pretty important, especially if you're undergoing a specific kind of like where you're actually mobilizing toxins and helping to expel them. You definitely need to keep those pathways open, and keeping the kidneys open means sending fluid through them so that they can expel it, and extra fluids, right? So that they can, the fluid enters the kidneys via the blood. So you're basically expanding the blood, and then that's being filtered through the kidneys. And the only way we do that is to drink extra fluid. And if you don't, you're just not going to, the kidneys won't be able to create enough urine to dispel whatever toxins need to be dispelled through the urinary pathway. Sweat is another avenue. And again, you just need to maintain your fluid intake if you want to be able to optimally remove toxins through the kidneys as well as through the liver. Again, you need good blood flow into the liver so that it can filter out toxins and expel them into the gut. And then you also need fluids to help optimize bowel movements. So all of that stuff is important to open up. You have to make sure the detox pathways are open, and then start to help your body to release toxins. So take a look on Substack if you're interested. Let me see what else. There was an article published in The Atlantic. The title was "Why It Was Easier to Be Skinny in the 1980s." So a study found that people today who eat and exercise the same amount as people 20 years ago are still fatter. And I think this is important for people to understand that it's the toxins, right? So basically the idea was obesogenic chemicals that we're exposed to, plus prescription drugs. Way more people are on prescription drugs nowadays. If you're middle-aged and you go to the doctor and you say, I'm not taking any over-the-counter or prescription drugs, they're usually pretty shocked. They're what? Are you sure? Are you serious? Which is crazy. Even like 20, 30 years ago, that would have been pretty normal, to be middle-aged and be on nothing. But nowadays, it seems like everyone's on something. Another one to look out for, I'm working on right now, by the way, now that I just thought about it, on the topic of prescription and over-the-counter drug use, is an article on the most prevalent chronic disease. I didn't know this, but the most prevalent chronic disease in the United States is chronic sinusitis. And we've known since 1999, I tweeted this out, maybe if a lot of the stuff I tweet out doesn't actually end up on my followers' timelines for whatever reason. Maybe it's not interesting enough, but if you missed it, there was a study showing in 1999, 25 years ago, that basically all chronic sinusitis is fungal, some form or another of fungal. So the vast majority, 95 and 96% of it, is an immune response to a colonizing fungus, and then a small percentage, 4 to 5%, is a severe allergic response to fungus. So this has still not yet made it into mainstream consciousness, and I think the real underlying reason why is that, again, it's the single most prevalent chronic disease, which means it's a cash cow. So estimates vary between $4 to $12 billion a year that are spent, various ways, over-the-counter, prescription drugs, surgeries for polyps, stuff like that. So I think something like 33% of chronic sinusitis cases are bad enough that they trigger polyps to form, and 2/3 don't have polyps, and then tiny percentage, actually a little bit over 1/3 probably have polyps, because the severe allergic fungal form also has polyps. So maybe somewhere like between 33 and 40%, or 36, 37%, up to that much might have polyps involved in their disease. So anyway, this article is going to come out at some point in the next couple of weeks, probably, because I'm just wrapping it up. And it will explain why, even though it's fungal, you probably don't want to just kill the fungus with antifungals. So they did, a couple of years later, do a study I don't know why I'm talking about this. I mean, I'm writing the article, I'm going to publish it, but I'm going to tell you guys because it's on my mind. They did a study. So in 1999, they published that research. And basically the reason that, I guess the more superficial reason why no one has yet accepted it, like, when you go to UpToDate, so UpToDate Online is kind of like the go-to source for physicians in practice today to answer any question and to get the most up-to-date information on any illness. And so you go to UpToDate, and it says, it explains that studies have shown that only, 5% or less of sinusitis is linked to fungal colonization or infection, right? And what you realize, if you read between the lines, is that these researchers in 1999, fungal testing is not very prevalent in the clinic or even in the research world. So they did, they did more advanced testing, and so they were able to see the problem, right? So essentially, all the other research has not used the same level of advanced testing. And so, you would think that the people writing this, review article on UpToDate would understand, right? And either they do and they're covering it up because it's such a big business, or they don't, and they haven't looked deeply enough into it, and they're just not aware. I don't know. I mean, at some point, you have to. You can't keep absolving people of responsibility. So your doctor in the clinic is unaware because in med school, for the last 25 years, they've continued to teach that it's like, oh, we don't know what causes it. It's for some reason the nose becomes inflamed. You get a acute sinusitis, maybe it's a bacterial, and then for some reason it just doesn't stop. It's immune, whatever, dysregulation. And so the solutions, they're not perfect, and they're really bad, and they probably worsen the underlying problem, are antihistamines and maybe steroids, and occasionally the exacerbations are again treated with antibiotics. So anyway, the basic reason, or at least the superficial reason, but I think it's more of an excuse why it hasn't percolated into all of medicine, is that every other study ever done on the matter didn't use the right tests. They didn't use adequate testing to see the mold that was in everyone that they were testing. So anyway, a few years later, 2001, I think, the same trio of doctors from Mayo Clinic, still beating the drums, trying to tell everyone it's, everything, every chronic sinusitis case is fungal inflammation, inflammation due to fungus. So they treat something like 100 people, who all have chronic sinusitis without testing them. They didn't check for mold or whatever. I mean, they already knew everyone has mold. So anyway, they just took 100 random people and treated them all with antifungals, and a specific antifungal, amphotericin B intranasal. And they found that I think 75% of them, all their symptoms go away. Maybe something like half of that group, when they tested, the fungus was gone. The other half, even though symptoms were gone, fungus wasn't quite completely eliminated. And then, 25% didn't respond. And, so what they had uncovered earlier, a few years earlier in their research, showed that everyone on average had 2 to 3 different fungi in their nose, and maybe some of them were resistant to amphotericin B, or maybe they just needed a longer course in order to suppress the fungi enough that the immune response went away and the symptoms went away. Anyway, I mean, it was pretty remarkable, results. 75% had no symptoms after a short course of amphotericin B. And if they had continued, they probably would have resolved most of the people's symptoms in that cohort. So they did confirm their research, and still, I mean, it was a small trial. You need to do larger trials, and you need to do double-blind, placebo-controlled, blah blah blah, on thousands of people, and no one was ever interested enough to pick up their research and continue it. They're still beating their drums like years later, and no one's listening. Anyway, this article that I'm covering will go into details of why the fungus is there, right? So just killing the fungus is probably a bad idea, because the fungus is there for a good reason. And this gets into digging down into the actual root causes of things, instead of just stopping And, you got to ask, why is the fungus there? And assume maybe it's there for a good reason, and we'll show that it is there for a good reason. So you want to correct, absolve the fungus of any responsibility in your nose, and then fungus will go away, or it'll, become less prevalent in your nose and get down to normal levels, and your immune system will stop reacting to it. And if not, you can kind of beat it back and cull the herd, so to speak. But I think the key understanding here is that the microbiome is not just good bacteria, right? It's bacteria, it's fungi, it's viruses, it's parasites in some cases. All of these things can be part of a healthy microbiome. And you should, I think, start with the assumption that the microbiome is responding to the environment and doing something to help you, rather than doing something to harm you, or that it's a bad bug, right? Whether a bad, dysbiosis, bad bacteria, or bad fungi, or whatever. You should ask the question, what could it be doing to help me? And anyway, that's the question that we'll answer with the upcoming article. Another interesting piece of news, Richard Hirschman on Twitter about 24 hours ago tweeted out some links to a study showing that over 500 proteins were found in the strange, giant fibrous clots that are being pulled out of people with who have vaccine injuries, the ones you've seen on, on social media, filling up test tubes, and, they've done exposés on this and stuff. And I don't know yet if anyone's compared these to the microclots. They may be two distinct categories of clots. So the microclots, according to Risha Pretorius, can be triggered by spike protein directly. These large fibrous clots, I don't know, are they the same as the microclots? Are they triggered by spike or by something in the lipid nanoparticles? That's another possibility, that there's components of the lipid nanoparticles. They are quite complicated biomolecules, and some of those components in the production of lipid nanoparticles could be what's triggering these giant clots. Anyway, the interesting thing was that these are really abnormal fibrous clots. The main component of a normal clot in the bloodstream is fibrin, which kind of glues everything together. These clots have the precursor of fibrin. They don't have fibrin, at least not in the quantities that you would expect. So fibrinogen makes up something like about half, 50% of these, actually more than that, 55, 56%. At least. So about 56% of the clots are fibrinogen, which was not converted into fibrin, strangely enough, in these giant, strange clots. So that the comments in that are also quite interesting and revealing. So that's what put me on the trail of the LNPs, the lipid nanoparticles, as being possibly the key to unraveling what's going on. And it just kind of feels like the alternative media, has been the narrative there has been entirely focused on spike protein. So I think that, I think all narratives are being managed, whoever you want to call it, deep state, CIA, whatever, the intelligence agencies, big pharma, whoever, the DoD, somebody is out there in the background trying to manage and direct narratives. And, in some cases that requires what they call a limited hangout, where instead of like revealing the entire truth, you reveal a little bit because you just have to, and at this point, I think we're nearing the stage where we're going to have a widespread, perhaps limited hangout on the COVID shots, right? And saying that they were a bad idea, but the technology itself is okay. Because the technology is worth a lot more than just the COVID shots were worth a lot. Okay, they made a lot of money on them, but that's gone now. And if they're, more and more, you're seeing like in the fringes of the mainstream, people starting to say that the shots, shouldn't be given, and maybe they're harmful or whatever, right? Chris Cuomo and other people who retired, and now they're kind of like mainstream adjacent, are starting to say that they made a mistake, whatever. So it looks like you know, the stage is being set to make the COVID shots and possibly even Fauci, you know, fall guys, but preserve the mRNA technology platform for future use in everything, okay, in all vaccines and cancer stuff and whatever, right? So they kind of like snuck this in, you know, this platform technology, basically in through the back door during COVID without properly testing it. And whatever went wrong during the COVID pandemic, they're going to try to just pin the blame on spike protein, right? Without talking about the technology itself, right? And the technology itself obviously involves the lipid nanoparticles. The lipid nanoparticles have their own toxicity, but just the mechanism of action of the technology, where the lipid nanoparticles that have the mRNA inside of them have to transfect, they have to pass into a cell, right? So if they're in the bloodstream, they will pass into this wall of the blood vessel. So there's cells that make up the walls of the blood vessels. They'll take up the lipid nanoparticle with its package of mRNA, and then they will express spike protein on their surface, and then they will come and they will be destroyed by the immune system, which means there will be bleeding, right, and clotting, and you know, so just the technology itself doesn't work properly. Because it has to destroy our own cells in order to be effective, in order to trigger the immune response. And also, I mean, certainly the injection route is fraught with danger, because there will be a significant amount of uptake into the vascular system where the main problems occur. Again, so in the future, they'll probably deal with some of these problems, but not all of them, right? They might change the route of administration from vascular if enough people figure out that that's where a lot of the harm comes from the intravascular nature of the injection, because the muscle is hypervascularized, and you know, a significant percentage of injections into a muscle will end up in the bloodstream, where they will destroy blood vessels, where they will cause clotting and other problems. But obviously, you know, I'm not saying the spike protein is harmless. It's clearly harmful. It can itself trigger clots, as Risha Pretorius has shown. It does cause inflammation. And so what you're packaging into the thing, you know, is important. And anyway, I don't believe we should be vaccinated at all. But, you know, just considering how you could possibly fix some of the problems. And basically, they're going to just keep trying to cover up the full picture by giving us little, you know, pieces of it. And if enough goes wrong, they'll hang somebody or something out to dry, right? Which feels like that's what's about to happen, possibly, right? They won't do it if they don't have to, right? Like if they don't have to create a fall guy, they won't. If they don't have to blame the spike on, you know, if they can contain it, then they will. But if it does get out, they've already created an alternative narrative to the mainstream narrative that blames primarily the spike protein, and that doesn't really implicate the technology as much. So most of the people who are being amplified in the alternative medical space are not talking about the problems with the technology. And I'm as much to blame as anyone, because you just kind of like start hearing it from everywhere. It goes viral and everyone's talking about spike, 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 right? And not paying attention to the rest. So I'm trying to remedy that right now. We need to be talking about the whole thing. And the platform technology is terrible, and it should not have made it into widespread use. And you know, now it's in a lot of treatment or a lot of trials. You know, it's being trialed in a lot of different areas, being injected into the food supply, etc. Okay, let me see if there's anything else in kind of like the news category that I wanted to mention. Okay. I think that's enough. Okay, so let me pull up the live Q&A. So first of all, let me just see if there's any. Again, I'm logged out here. So weird. Trying to see the chat. I think most people. Are we streaming to X right now? Yes, we are. Okay. Anyway, you guys can drop comments in the chat or in X. I'll try to keep an eye on the X replies as well. Okay, so the first question was from Jamie Schwenherda. Dr. Haider mentioned that after us all being on CD, zinc, quercetin, etc., some of us for a long time, that we are all probably needing A, E, and the B vitamins as well. Do we need to just, and also copper. So zinc can deplete copper when you overdo the zinc. Do we need to just switch to a good multivitamin or add in the A, E, Bs, and copper? So I think that probably the best thing to do is to start eating highly nutritious foods that have everything you need in them. And that you don't have to avoid vitamin D containing foods like, fatty fish or anything. But you should add things that are high in vitamin A and E. So E you can get from a lot of plant foods, and vitamin A you can get particularly from liver, animal liver. And the B vitamins are obviously available in liver as well as some plant foods. Maybe it's not obvious, but anyway, liver is a great kind of natural multivitamin. Doesn't have everything. So you can find copper in things like oysters. You could get an oyster powder supplement, so it would have some zinc and copper as well. So I'm not saying that you need to avoid the things that you've been taking, but you do need to start getting them in a natural form so that your body can figure out what to do with the current situation. So your body knows best. And if you give it natural foods and natural sources, it will titrate the levels of everything in your body to be optimal. So that, I think, is probably what most people need to do. Of course, to really optimize it, you need to work with somebody. And you need to figure out what's going on in your own body and where things need to be rebalanced. So it's kind of difficult to say without talking to an individual person directly. A particular person might not have become imbalanced by taking C, D, zinc, and quercetin, and for 2 years. Maybe they needed that, right? So I think that's what a lot of people assume, that, well, I need it anyway. But I think the important thing, the key to this question is that when you specifically focus on one of the fat-soluble vitamins. So the fat-soluble vitamins, the ones that can be dissolved in fat, are A, D, E, and K. And if you just focus on one of them, then you might not get enough of the other three. And if you just focus on some of them, you might not get the others absorbed as well. So you can become depleted in some of the others. And the same with zinc and copper. If you take a lot of zinc, you might become deficient in copper after some time. But it's not necessarily the case, right? It's a possibility. So yeah, you need to determine if you really need to take extra of something else. And I don't like taking supplements in general. You can get everything you need from food, and that's where you should get it from. Food-borne vitamins come in a matrix package. They're surrounded by a bunch of cofactors and things that you need, and they're in natural quantities as well. So this goes for herbs, it goes for vitamins, it goes for all micronutrients. Food is an information package, right? And the information, when you get it in its natural form, makes sense to the body. Your body can understand it and do something intelligent with it. When you refine something, I think that the main issue with the modern world, one of the main issues, one of the main issues from a dietary perspective is refinement, right? Refined foods. So vitamins are, by their very nature, refined foods when you're taking them in a supplement form and removing them from their natural state. So I think that vitamins like the ones that we sell on my go-to stack, they're useful for people as like a last ditch, in a situation where they may not have been eating appropriately for their whole life or for many years or even for a few months. And then they end up with something like COVID, and they want to make sure that they have enough of everything they need to deal with that infection. And then, in situations as like a prophylactic, perhaps you could use them. So I think those are the ways that they should be used primarily, as you keep it on hand in case you need a little boost here and there. But for long-term health and in the future, the thing you should really be doing is optimizing your nutrition, right? Eating highly nutritious foods like organ meats. Certain vegetables are packed with nutrition. eggs, dairy, but some people will need to, there might be a journey involved because they may be responding inappropriately to some of those foods like the eggs and the dairy. But almost everyone can tolerate meat just fine. So, all right. So Brenda says, I have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, gut dysbiosis. I've had past mold issues, Lyme, UTIs. I guess recently she never had them before, but now she does. Most likely diverticulitis, food sensitivities. I ordered Dr. Haider's something. Afraid to take all those combined, haven't opened the jar. How to start slow, using quercetin complex from some manufacturer that has, I think, C, calcium, bromelain, citrus, rosehips, rudin, acerola berry. I think it gave me severe diarrhea, is what it says. Interested in the opinion on LDN. I have 3 years of long COVID. Thank you. And P.S. Do use air filters for sinus congestion, plus do self-lymphatic drainage. I'm in Maine, I think. Hard to get sunlight. I use red light therapy, I guess. Take sun early in the morning, or it burns my skin later on. So, it really shouldn't be burning your skin, but if you're eating properly and you're not eating any seed oils, which reminds me that Catherine Shanahan, she published a couple of books now, but one of probably the first one that I remember was called Deep Nutrition, great book, and she's just published a new one on why seed oils are so harmful. It's called Dark Calories, I think. It's available now from her website and from booksellers, wherever books are sold, as they say. So anyway, seed oils are really, really harmful. Okay, they will disrupt all your hormones and they'll disrupt your cellular communications, and just every single cell in your body is made up of fat in the walls, especially. So like the outer walls of every cell are full of fat, and then there's, fats are involved in. So anyway, the outer walls are required for cells to communicate with the outside world. And so all the signaling pathway, everything will just be disrupted by those outer walls being built improperly. And a lot of other structures require fat as well. So hormones also require fat, cholesterol. But basically the seed oils damage all other fats in the body. They spread this kind of inflammation throughout all the other fats. And it takes a little while to detox from them. It can take months. It can sometimes take a year or two to fully get them out of your cells and replace them with healthy fats. And if you're not actively avoiding them, they probably constitute a huge percentage of your calories, and because they're in everything, they're so cheap, right? And so every restaurant uses them. I mean, there's like 0.001% of the restaurants in the country don't use seed oils, okay? It's extremely rare. The restaurants that say they use olive oil, they're probably using adulterated olive oil. It's not real olive oil unless they've gone to extraordinary lengths to get it direct from the farm. Most olive oil is going to be adulterated. So, some of the restaurants will be like, oh yeah, we use olive oil. It's not olive oil, come on. But nowadays you can Google like seed oil free restaurants. And there are a couple of websites, and you'll find maybe like one or two, like a handful in a major metropolitan area. There might be like 2 or 3 restaurants listed on the map on some of these websites that try to collect them, that are using something like, beef tallow or butter, or clarified butter or something like that. Those are, so places that say they're using butter, outside of Puerto Rico, possibly. I went to a restaurant once and asked for butter, and they gave me something that was not butter. Okay, it wasn't even in like the same neighborhood as butter. I don't know what it was. It was some kind of like dressing. It's the weirdest thing I've ever experienced at a restaurant. Anyway, so okay. All right, so what's going on here? This is very complicated, right? It's a very complicated case, obviously, and it can be fixed, but it's, I would see Hakim Shabazz, my close friend and colleague, okay? Go to mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. Um, this kind of case requires a deeply personalized protocol. If you really want, you can get rid of everything. Okay, you can fix the SIBO, the gut dysbiosis, the mold, the Lyme, the UTIs, the food sensitivities, the long COVID. All this stuff can be fixed. But if you just, if you do something superficial, like I was talking about the mold or the, the fungal infection and the sinuses, you can use that as kind of like a, to kind of like explain this situation as well. There's a reason that everything is happening. And if you just kill the mold, then you will create an imbalance, right? So let's say let's assume the mold has come in. Actually, I didn't explain it earlier when I was talking about it. I kind of left it for, so anyway, I'll explain it, right? So what could the mold be doing? Instead of being coy and, wait for the article to come out in 2 weeks. Mold is very good at dealing with toxins, all right? So when you become overly toxic, you might get mold or fungus. It might start growing because your body is unable to get rid of the toxins. It's unable to sequester them and be protected from them. So the mold can come and help to sequester and deal with those toxins until your body can release them. And a lot of times you don't let the body release them, right? So like the diarrhea, probably toxin release, getting stuff out of your system. It doesn't just happen in one go, right? It's like one episode of diarrhea, oh, I'm detoxified, I'm good. No, it could take months, and it usually does, of repeated, detoxification attempts and, not just attempts, but actual detoxification. So it looks like an illness, right? I mean, it's what we define as illness is detoxification, right? You're having like a lot of mucus, a lot of diarrhea, a lot of sweating, a lot of urination, a lot of vomiting, a lot of whatever, a nosebleed, something is coming out of your body, right? Basically, whenever something comes out of you, it's bringing toxins out with it, okay? It's simple as that. So the approach is usually wrong, right? Oh, I have SIBO, I have gut dysbiosis, I have UTIs, I'm urinating a lot, right? You need to urinate a lot, right? You probably need to drink even more and be happy you're urinating a lot instead of, your body's using whatever excuse it can get to help mobilize toxins. So, and again, it can go on a lot longer than you would think it should. You might have recurrent quote unquote UTIs or diarrhea or whatever for 6 months. And if you just cover it up, you're actually getting in the way of toxin release and not helping it along. But to deal with the deeper underlying issue, even below the realm of physical toxins, there's going to be emotional, kind of psycho-spiritual, mental toxins as well as physical toxins that have left your body kind of energy depleted, different parts of your body, your whole body, particular organs, especially energy depleted, and more susceptible, less able to mobilize the toxins out. So it gets back to what I was saying last week about, oftentimes the person who has a pretty robust reaction to something, you say, oh, that person got really sick, they have a bad immune system. I didn't get that sick, I have a good immune system. It might be the opposite. Okay, the person who got really sick might have the much stronger immune response. It's an immune response that creates all of those illness symptoms, and a really robust one is what you want. You want a really strong one, right? Not overdoing it, right? That's a problem as well when you go too far. But you want a balanced, robust immune response. The most robust immune response will kind of like kick the thing out before it even gets to the point where you have to have symptoms and stuff. So that's later. So yeah, it is true from one perspective that a really, really robust immune system might just deal with the problem before it even reaches the level of your conscious awareness. You won't have any symptoms. But once it reaches the symptomatic stage, it's possible in some cases, again, not everyone, but sometimes more robust response might actually indicate a stronger immune system. So anyway, I can't really tell you exactly what to do because it's just too complicated. I don't know if this, supplement that you're taking will be beneficial for you or not. All I know is that the primary objective should not be to rid yourself of all the symptoms. It should be to rid yourself from the reason for the symptoms, right? So you have to detoxify, you have to stop exposing yourself to more toxins. So those seed oils have to go. Pesticides, as much as you can, avoid them. Even electromagnetic fields, non-natural ones like, Wi-Fi, turn it off at night. If you can turn off your whole house at night, that's even better. And most people aren't going to do that because they want the AC running, but it could be very helpful, right? So I'm thinking of just sleeping in the yard in a tent or something to see if it makes a difference in how I feel compared to sleeping inside with the AC running. I'm one of those people who likes to experiment with things like that. So all of these things, like with mold, for example, we know that and even our own cells, right? They respond. They are altered. Calcium, channels are opened. All these physiological changes happen when we're in an electromagnetic field, like a Wi-Fi or a 4G or a 5G, whatever, right? So cellular service and Wi-Fi from your own house, from your neighbor's houses, and also just the wiring in your house itself creates electromagnetic fields that can disrupt cellular communication and cellular functioning. And it's interesting, mold actually grows more when it's exposed to electromagnetic fields, even unnatural ones, even like out and out, ionizing radiation. Mold will grow towards it. Mold was found to grow towards Chernobyl, right? So it grows towards toxicity, even EMFs. I don't know if it has, if it in some way, it's soaking up EMF, it's like protecting you from it. But the point here is that your body and its infinite wisdom, it's incredible, will oftentimes maneuver around a really bad situation where there's no good choice, and it'll make the best possible choice for that situation. So you could imagine that, mold is part of your microbiome, and it's always there anyway, and it will start to overgrow a bit when there's a lot of toxicity that your body is not able to handle on its own anymore. It'll pick up the slack, and that will cause some problems, right? Your immune system, your eosinophils will come in and respond to the mold and create inflammation and cause discharge and mucus and all that stuff, which is also trying to get rid of the problem as well. And so just something that you shouldn't be suppressing. So anyway, eventually you might want to, take antimicrobials, but not in the beginning. You want to first deal with the root issues that are emotional and relationship issues and, whatever those issues are, plus the physical toxins. You want to help to start mobilizing them out, start taking things that help your body get rid of them, chlorella, other things like that. And do the emotional relationship work. And then eventually, later on you start to, if the mold is not, regressing on its own, you're going to beat it back a little bit. And again, you don't want to just take super strong antifungals that wipe out all the fungi in your body, because some of them are likely to be beneficial. And, very strong antifungals, whether, especially the herbal ones, are going to also have antibiotic effects, and they will kill bacteria as well. So you don't want to just indiscriminately kill things. Usually you want to beat them back. You might need to address, also biofilms and things like that along the way. Anyway, it's a step-by-step process, and it takes a lot of wisdom to navigate through it, and people need help, and they need somebody who has been through it many, many times before with a lot of different people, and they can see the pitfalls and warn you of them, and they can reassure you when you go through a reaction that seems terrible and tell you just put up with it. It's much better than the alternative, mainstream therapy, and you'll get through it, and you'll be really thankful once you do. Mark says, what's the best remedy for long COVID, shortness of breath? Yeah, there's no one best remedy. It all depends on your specific situation. So this is Mark Stahl, and then Mark Cohen has the same question. Is there a successful treatment for long COVID, shortness of breath? I've now had long COVID for 3.5 years and still can't exercise. If I physically exert, I tend to get worse. And for the past 8 months, I've had discomfort and pain on the left side of my stomach whenever I exert. So I believe it's a long COVID symptom as well. Yeah. So, in both these cases, it's really going to depend on a deeply personalized assessment, right? Like we got to figure out what are the things contributing to your shortness of breath right now. And it can be fixed. And I would highly recommend going to Hakim Shabazz if you want to, 3.5 years is long enough to be suffering with it. You can get rid of it. And so anyway, I know for sure, for a fact, that breath work will help to retrain the nervous system. And that is probably the place that most people need to start who have long COVID shortness of breath. They need to start with something like Buteyko breathing, or go to like a skilled practitioner of pranayama breathing, pranayama yoga, the breath work, yoga breath work. Hakim Shabazz is great, probably the best in all of these realms. He'll give you some breathwork exercises and address deeper emotional relationship issues, along with helping you detox whatever's left. So long COVID is just the tip of the iceberg. You can't be overly focused on spike and long COVID. We have to address all the other stuff that built up over the entire life that led to this issue developing. So even though the last straw is long COVID, you could completely eliminate spike from your body, and just, it's such a good metaphor, right? That's why I keep coming back to it. You overload this camel, right, with a lot of straw, a lot of hay. You just keep piling it on. And eventually, even if you're dropping the hay on straw by straw, one straw at a time, eventually you're going to reach a point where the camel is going to collapse, right? And that point, there's going to be a point where it's fine. It's able to put up with all of the weight. And then the last straw, you're going to drop that last straw on its back, and it's going to collapse, the straw that broke the camel's back. So just removing that last straw doesn't heal the camel's back, right? That's the whole point here, and why it's such a good metaphor. So you can't just remove the spike. You've got to, at that point, rehabilitate the animal and go through some physical therapy and remove all the straw, right? Before, and then once you're better, then you can start, loading up the camel again with straw. But there's a whole process here that's involved in recovering once a disease manifests itself. Once the last straw shows up and the disease finally manifests itself, shifting back into a state of health can take a lot more effort. You might need to resolve things that have been going on your whole life. So it requires a deep assessment, okay? You need to sit with the patient. I need to sit with them for like 2 or 3 hours. Hakim Shabazz can usually get it done in 1 to 2 hours, but it's better to have more time than less, because the time gives you two things. It gives you time enough to dig around in the details of the person's past, and gives them a chance to like really think about them and remember them as they're telling you about them, right? They'll remember things they had forgotten, and it's a guided interview, right? So the person guiding you along in that interview will be able to help you uncover things that other people have never uncovered before about your past. And then they'll also be able to explain to you how all those things make sense together to create your symptom, the symptom that you have, why you have shortness of breath versus brain fog. Some people have brain fog. Why do they have brain fog and you have shortness of breath? So you can explain why. And the why leads to how to fix it. Okay, once you understand why, you become deeply invested in the solution. The person explains to you why you have the problem, and then they explain to you, this is how we're going to fix that underlying root cause issue and get you better, and they explain why that will work. And then you can commit to the solution, right? So, just putting a message out there and like, oh, have you figured it out yet? Have you figured out what causes long COVID shortness of breath? In a one word, answer, or like, I'm just going to tell you the herb to take and it's going to get better. It doesn't work like that. All right. Sometimes it works like that for some people. But the deep, persistent problems that just aren't getting better, it's going to take a lot more than that. Just like, and the biggest stumbling block here is if you did find something that was a simple, easy fix for you, it would probably just shunt the problem somewhere else, right? So you could hack your way out of a problem, and you could force the shortness of breath to go away by creating some biohack, right? It's possible. That does happen sometimes, and maybe there is one out there, right? Maybe you will stumble across somebody online who's like, oh yeah, I took blah, blah, blah. I took this weird, herb, or I did this weird thing, and the shortness of breath is gone now. Well, amazing, it's a miracle. And it may not be the miracle you want, right? It may it may be, the opposite of a blessing in disguise. So basically, it's like you can cover something up in a lot of different ways, and that doesn't mean that the deep underlying root cause is completely eliminated. It just has to find a different way to express itself. And you can think of the body as like a hydraulic system. Everything is interconnected. If you push down over here, something's got to give somewhere else. Okay, so something's got to give. All right, so just hyper focusing on the symptom and give me the solution to my symptom is not the right approach. It will harm you in the end. Okay, you have to become focused on why do I have the symptom, and the answer is not going to be an easy fix. It's going to take time, and it's going to be a little bit complicated, and you're going to have to change a lot of things about your life if you want the real fix, the real solution that doesn't lead to a greater problem later on. So hopefully that's helpful. Go see Hakim Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. Connie DiLorenzo says, I have had long COVID for almost 4 years. One of my biggest symptoms is digestion issues with a history of SIBO. Someone posted that they got relief for their digestion issues when they took immunity herbals. Can you recommend where I can get the immunity herbals? I mean, it's mygotostack.com, but this kind of feeds into the last, question. And what I was saying there, that just because immunity herbals fix somebody's symptom doesn't mean that it fixed the underlying root cause. So, I mean, we formulated it because we do think that it's addressing the underlying root issues of spikeopathy and helping your body eliminate spike. So the immunity, I'm selling it for a reason, right? I think that it is helping to address that. And the things in there, the dandelion, the Nigella sativa, and the curcumin, I mean, they are used for a lot of problems. I mean, they have broad spectrum use cases, right? Like you could almost just give turmeric to anyone, okay? And the same for Nigella sativa. I mean, these things are called, what they call black seed. They say it's the cure of all diseases except for death, right? And turmeric is similar, like in the subcontinent. It's basically, you can almost use it on anyone, right? And you'll find some benefit, similar to ashwagandha, but not everyone, okay? So there are going to be some people where it's not optimal for them. And so dandelion also is great for digestive issues. So it's one of those bitters that people use for digestive support. So it's possible that this is helping address the underlying issues with digestion, but it doesn't mean it's going to fix your digestion issues, right? It might not. And it might not be like a real deep, thorough solution, right? So it has to be used in the setting of a comprehensive protocol that's individualized to you. So, I mean, the reason we sell it is because, like I said before, it is useful in almost everyone in the world, right? Who has illnesses, you can give them Nigella sativa and turmeric and feel pretty safe that you're doing them a good turn. And dandelion also. But if you want to, and so it might be, the thing that you need, but in my experience, in Shabazz's experience, if you want that deep healing, where you don't get the problem popping up again in the future or some other problem popping up again in the future, immunity herbals might be part of that protocol, but it's not going to be the whole thing. So you can certainly find relief. Mygotostack.com, that's where it's available, mygotostack.com. So Bronia says, what heals leaky gut after COVID infection? I also have neuropathy, histamine reactions, and GI problems. I mean, it's like the same answer I've been giving, right? So it's going to require an individual protocol where you're not blaming the wrong thing for your problem. So spike, COVID, that's part of the problem. Possibly even persistent viral infection with COVID is part of the problem. But if that were the only problem you had, if I picked you up from the Amazon and you caught COVID, and you had barely any exposure to the toxins of the modern world, it's unlikely that you would, it's extremely unlikely. I mean, it's probably almost close to impossible that you would develop long COVID, okay? So we saw this in sub-Saharan Africa, and so basically, we're talking about toxicity that's been there for your whole life. And so the real solution is step-by-step detoxification. And that might include, getting rid of heavy metals, pesticides, microplastics, brain detox, getting rid of overgrowth of parasites, bacteria, biofilms, Lyme, mold, fungi, whatever. Just by the way, mold toxicity that people usually talk about, it's seriously triggered by mold spores in the air, right? And most people have that kind of mold toxicity when they leave the area where the mold is in the air. Their symptoms will go away or dramatically lessen. Whereas once the mold or the fungus establishes, colonizes your body, you can have problems that you can't escape by going somewhere else. Lucas says, "What's your experience with methylene blue?" Let me just go back to the Bronia question for a second. The other thing that helps a lot with gastrointestinal problems oftentimes is triphala. Also, one of those. It's a 3-herb combination, also similar to the other ones I spoke of, that has a lot of utility in a lot of people and can be pretty safely used by just about anyone with any kind of stomach upset problem. Fasting also is tremendously beneficial for long COVID as well as any gut issue, right? So you might look into fasting and maybe triphala as well. And then the neuropathy, I think, is it's basically a neurological issue, right? So I think of the nervous system, the central and the peripheral, as kind of like one unit, functional unit at least. And so I do think that you do need brain detoxification. So I would get the brain detox cream. And I've posted that before, the link to it. And like I said, there will be in the next couple of weeks, there will be a blog post on it as well. But we can give you the link. There's a Google Doc link to the brain detox cream that we can put out there. Let's see. I just want to make sure it's the right one. Yeah. This isn't the prettiest link, but oops. Let me just put it into the chat here. I don't know, it's not going on, so you're gonna have to do it. All right, so the other thing, I was reading today, allergy. If I'm not saying this is always going to be the case, but in some people, it could be related to like a subconscious or conscious pride issue. So, and the opposite of that, or like the way to think about that, I guess, would be that people who are very prideful tend to disdain other people and other than themselves, right? So, or look down upon. And so that can become more antagonistic, right? And so you can kind of understand why that might be linked at an energetic level to allergic reactions where you're responding kind of antagonistically to other than yourself. And even people who have autoimmune issues, not saying that this is related to pride, although it might be, but with autoimmune issues, you're attacking something. It appears that you're attacking yourself, and certainly maybe, in some people that might be related to like self-loathing or something. But in a lot of people, what's actually happening is that you're attacking something that's like an enemy within yourself. So there's, something that has taken up residence inside you, bacterial, parasitic, whatever, and your body's trying to root that out, or toxin, right? Trying to root it out from the cells in which it is found in your body. So I'm not saying that this is all, one particular energetic pattern or root cause, emotional, spiritual issue applies to everyone or all the time. I'm just saying that part of the investigation with a specific person is making sense of what it is for them, what's causing the issue for them. Anyway, Lucas says, what's your experience with methylene blue? I'm planning to start with a lower dose, for example, 10 milligrams per day, and work my way up to higher, for example, i.e. antimicrobial doses, like 100 milligrams per day. I hesitate to suggest or recommend methylene blue. I mean, it's way down on the list of possibilities in the protocol that I've published of all the things I know of that can be helpful in some people. So yeah, I haven't, my patients haven't used it a lot. I mean, a couple of people have used it, and it, in one way it acts as like a kind of a crutch for the mitochondria. So it'll boost mitochondrial energy production, and it's recommended to get a lot of sun exposure when you're using it. So I actually tried it myself once. I didn't notice anything. I just wanted to experiment with it. And then I gave it to, 2 people that I knew, and one of them had significant chronic fatigue and brain fog and all that, and didn't do anything. So it doesn't always work. And when it does work, it may not be the best option, even though it relieves the symptoms. You still need to, again, address the deep underlying root causes instead of using crutches, right? It's just a crutch. It's obviously a crutch, right? So, I mean, from one perspective, increasing energy production may help to deal with the underlying cause, but on the other hand, it does have some risk of side effects, and it's a bit unnatural seeming to me, which I tend to hesitate to use unnatural type of solutions. Natalie Fiorini says, how do we get reactivated virus to go back latent? So yeah, I mean, this again is going to be different in everyone, but basically you've got to create an environment where latency happens, right? So it's just cause and effect. So if the immune system has to get strong enough that it can put it back in its box, right? So the immune system is what's going to hold it in check ultimately. You might need to improve methylation, and that might help with keeping it locked up in the DNA or wherever it was to begin with. So yeah, if it's a retrovirus, if it's integrated into your own DNA, then you need to put it back in and seal it in there, and that can involve some methylation issues. So, but ultimately, you got to approach everything in a comprehensive way. There's no specific protocol to making reactivated viruses latent again, right? And part of it might include an antiviral to kill the active virus that's present. So at some point in the protocol that might be used, but a lot of people just start there and end there, and that's not the right way to do it, because you're not addressing why it got reactivated in the first place. So it'll just reactivate again, or you just won't be able to get rid of it completely. The active virus, you won't be able to kill it off because it's inside you and it just continues to reactivate. So it's really an immune dysfunction issue, and you got to ask, why is the immune system dysfunctional? Are there toxins present? Is there some sort of energetic drain, at some higher level that needs to be addressed? Stress. I mean, even people who swear to you they're not stressed, who swear to you that they're feeling as good as they've ever felt in their lives, they're functioning optimally, they don't have stress, even they are stressed, okay? It reminds me of a patient who, only after going through the whole protocol and realizing how good he could feel, did he realize he had never felt optimal in his whole life, all right? And so until you experience optimal, you probably have never experienced optimal before. And because we've been in a soup of toxins from the beginning, right? Literally from our first moment in this physical world, in the womb, we've been in a, toxic soup. No one can avoid it. So, unless you're actively detoxifying, you're not going to know what optimal feels like. So anyway, hope that helps. Fitneti Griva says, any success with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, any negative effects or Herxheimer's? One patient did, some people are super, super sensitive and they will Herx at anything. And those people, you need to do a lot of preliminary work so that they're able to tolerate detoxification without having severe Herxheimer reactions. So yeah, one patient, some people will have a Herxheimer from HPOT. And some people have had it, but it's not that common. I'm considering trying this after almost 2 years of long COVID. So yeah, some people think that that's really all you need to do is hyperbaric oxygen or normal baric oxygen, either one, just oxygen therapy, one way or the other. So normal baric oxygen therapy, like normal pressure, just out in the normal room, not inside an enclosure, with an oxygen mask, preferably non-rebreather oxygen mask, hooked up to just an oxygen concentrator, is the cheapest, most affordable, easiest, most convenient way of doing oxygen therapy. And the idea is to trigger stem cell production to heal the problems that have developed in the body. But it doesn't address toxicity, right? So you still have the detoxification issues. So it might, lead to resolution of symptoms and improvement and all that. But deep healing is going to require detox, and oxygen therapy might be a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole thing. So definitely it does help. A lot of people have had a lot of success with it. Somebody says, I had a cardiac stress MRI which showed the following results. In the late phase, there is a mid-wall myocardial enhancement at the inferior left ventricle, right ventricle insertion point, extending linearly to the part of the basal inferior septum, the lower part of the basal septum. Yeah, so I think this was just a comment in the Facebook group probably. So you should put the whole report there and give us your symptoms and stuff, and then we can maybe help figure out what they're trying to tell you. The other thing this just reminds me of is it's important not to, how you communicate findings is important because it can change the outcome for the patient. And whatever's going on with you, it can be healed and it can be completely reversed. I think that's the main thing that you need to hear. And don't be afraid by what the doctors tell you. Doctors, the one thing that they do best is frighten people into compliance with their recommendations, especially when the recommendation is something like surgery or some more extreme therapy. They will go to whatever lengths it takes to frighten you into agreeing to do it. They will bring out once in a lifetime, like I knew a patient who had this and they ended up stroking out or having a heart attack, whatever, and it looked just like this situation. And they don't tell you that they've also seen a million other people with the same exact presentation who didn't have a heart attack or whatever. So I hesitate to tell people to go to any doctors. I mean, sometimes you got to go, sometimes you have to go to a hospital to save your life, but you got to be prepared to ignore a lot of the stuff that they say. Anonymous member says, I've been experiencing leg cramps and stiffness in the hands when waking up the last couple of months. Also pins and needles in the legs. I take 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate and have my magnesium level checked out fine. Any suggestions? Did it only start after you started the magnesium? I mean, you gotta suspect anything, any change that you made, even something that you would expect would be beneficial for anyone on the face of the earth, to take more magnesium. It might not be beneficial for you, and that might not be an optimal dose, even if some magnesium is good. Maybe this is too much, uh, or maybe you don't have enough magnesium. I don't know, right? So it could be so many different things. It could be a potassium issue. It could be so many other different things. It could be B vitamin. It could be all kinds of things. I mean, it could have nothing to do with micronutrients like that at all. So it could be just neurological inflammation, and you might need to do brain detox. And so, yeah, unfortunately, without a deeper dive, it's impossible to say what it could be. Obviously, spike protein could be involved in some way. All right, everyone. Thank I think I got disconnected for a second, but I think I'm back. What I was saying was oh, okay, I do think we did have a comment from Jurassic Carl. Do you do cancer consults? My sister has been getting worse since her doctor started treating her CTCL. She trusts these fancy pants big hospital doctors, but they are useless. How do I convince her to consider alternative therapies doctors? So I could probably convince her, maybe. Hakeem Shabazz could convince her. There's like the superficial approach, which will oftentimes get rid of cancer. You just take ivermectin, albendazole or fenbendazole, vitamin C, baking soda, metformin, whatever. You come up with a generic kind of like approach, pretty generic. I mean, we don't oftentimes know exactly what to do. We just, we know that these things have anti-cancer effects, and a lot of people get better with them. But it's not like 100%, okay? So I don't know what percentage it is. I just know that it seems that they should work, and they oftentimes do. I've seen them work, but I've heard from other people that they didn't work. I don't know if they took the right dose, if they didn't take enough, who knows. But that's one approach, and it's more of a superficial approach, and it can get rid of the cancer. It can reveal the cancer to the immune system so that your immune system comes and eliminates it, but it doesn't get rid of the toxicity that led to the cancer in the first place. It doesn't address all of the reasons the cancer developed. So either the cancer comes back, and it can come back a lot worse, or something else happens, some other cancer or some other disease develops. So I try to convince people that if you really want a deep solution, you got to go deep yourself, okay? You got to let us go deep with you, and you've got to make some deep changes, and it's going to be like a 6-month journey, maybe 12-month journey, and you will feel better than you ever have in your life, probably a few months into it. But there will be these, periods where you feel much worse due to some detoxing. And you're just gonna have to stick with us, and we'll guide you through it. So if she's willing, she can see Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. He is the premier cancer specialist in the world today, okay? I think he's the person to go to for anything, but he has tons of experience with end-stage cancer healing, okay? Complete deep healing of cancer. So no one knows cancer the way he does. I wouldn't go to anyone else for any other serious disease either, because he understands the principles underlying the treatment of disease, and he can come up with protocols that are deeply personalized. So we work together, but I do prefer people see him directly, because he's got intuition and experience on his side, and he's well-versed in convincing people, that they should skip the standard treatments. And so I think I absolutely believe he'll be able to convince her. If he has a couple of hours to talk to her, he should be able to convince her. And if not, I don't think anyone can convince her. But either him or me, I've also convinced people to forego, it's risky, but to say it, from a medical legal perspective, but, especially people who have no other good options, right? So most cancer treatment options are not that great, right? So It's not even that risky because the alternative usually leads to death within a few months, regardless of what the medical system can give you. Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of a tweet that I put out. It was actually somebody else put it out, and then I think I riffed off of it. But basically, it was Tim Goyesh. I'm not sure how he says it. I think he's from Canada, who said something, insightful about cancer. So about 20 years ago, there was a study showing, and I think one was in Australia and maybe another one later somewhere else, showing that cancer chemotherapy was incredibly ineffective. It extended life. I mean, it had like a 1% or something, or even less, rate of quote unquote efficacy. And by efficacy, it might mean that it extended lifespan by, a few days or a couple of weeks or something compared to not taking it. And that's the best that they could manage, to wring out of the data, right? So, I mean, by now people who have been following along with the COVID pandemic fiasco should understand how much these companies can do to manipulate data and statistics. So the best that they could do was show hardly any benefit for almost all cancer chemotherapy. And so the only way that they could solve this giant problem in oncology was by basically starting to call things that they used to call normal or benign, they start calling those things cancer. And then they showed that, we cured cancer, right? So cancer cures in the last 20, 25 years have apparently, the efficacy of oncology has apparently gone up just because they've started calling precancerous lesions cancerous, right? So what used to be like stage 0, which means there was no cancer, is now considered to be cancerous. And so a lot of people are losing their breasts, all right, for no good reason. And, this reminds me of another study that went on for 10 years. And it essentially proved that a lot of breast cancer shows up and then disappears. If you don't look for it, you won't find it. If you do look for it, you'll see it, and then you'll undergo chemo, radiation, whatever, surgery in many cases, breast removal, or just lumpectomy or whatever. And you didn't have to. That cancer would have just regressed on its own if you had just waited long enough. And so what does that mean? I mean, that either means that literally cancer is coming and disappearing, or it's being misdiagnosed, okay? So you see a lump and somebody's kind of stretching the imagination just a tad to see something under the microscope that's not actually there, so people don't understand it's not a clear demarcation between pneumonia, no pneumonia on a chest x-ray, all right? There's a huge gray zone, okay? And there's a lot of quote unquote over-reading, right, is what they call it. Imagining something that's not really there. Another person will come and look at it, give you a second opinion, and be like, that's not pneumonia, that's nothing, okay? And yeah, a lot of radiologists will be covering their own ass, saying, there could be some pneumonia there in the left lower lobe, blah, 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 whatever. Maybe it's obscured by the, clothing, and I think it could be, you might want to do a CT scan. And meanwhile, you get treated for pneumonia, and the CT scan shows there never was pneumonia, but it, happens the day later. But with cancer, it's worse than that. I mean, a lumpectomy later, you realize that there probably wasn't any cancer. And then, say one pathologist calls it cancer, on a fine needle biopsy or something, and you go in and do a lumpectomy and remove it. The next pathologist, who's his buddy or who's the same pathologist, is not going to be like, oh, there's no cancer in there. Oops, we did the wrong thing. So people need to understand the level of, corruption and, human bias and just human nature is everywhere. Okay, so whatever you know about human nature from yourself and your kids and your family, doctors are exactly the same. Or worse. All right. So, yeah. Anyway, I guess that's probably enough of a rant on that topic. Let me see if there's any other comments, questions. Doesn't look like it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.